Their greatest argument as an engaged couple was about to start when Taylor Swift told Travis Kelce, "You're rushing the wedding planning." Travis retorted, "You're trying to control every detail." However, in the end, this wedding timeline issue would teach them both the true meaning of compromise. November 15, 2025, at 6:30 p.m. After a lengthy rehearsal session, Travis Kelce expected to find Taylor Swift lounging in the living room or even preparing supper when he entered his Kansas City home. Rather, he discovered her at his kitchen table, totally encircled by spreadsheets with a precise timeline, vendor contracts, venue photographs from European castles, color swatches, and wedding planning papers. On her laptop, she was cross-referencing availability dates in 3 separate planning binders. For the most of the NFL season, Taylor stayed in Kansas City to help Travis, converting his guest room into a temporary workspace where she could compose music and, it seems, organize their wedding. "Hey babe," Travis said, setting down his gear bag and kissing the top of her head, before looking at the elaborate setup that had taken over his entire kitchen table. "Wow, this looks comprehensive. I'm trying to organize everything so we can make informed decisions," Taylor explained, not looking up from her laptop screen. "I've been researching venues in Europe, and if we want the Chateau to Chambord in France for spring 2027, we need to put down a deposit by January 15th. But that means we need to finalize the guest list, choose the catering style, and select the floral design concept all within the next 2 months. Travis pulled out the chair across from her, studying the color-coded spreadsheets and 18-month planning timeline. "Taylor, why are we booking a venue that's a year and a half away?" "Because that's how destination wedding planning works," Taylor said, finally looking up. "European venues book up 2 years in advance, especially for high-profile events. If we don't secure everything now, we'll end up with our backup options for everything." "But what if we don't need a European castle? What if we could do something closer and sooner?" Taylor felt her stress level spike immediately. "Closer, Travis, we've talked about this. A wedding in the US would be a media circus. Photographers hiding in trees, helicopters overhead, paparazzi bribing vendors for inside information. We need somewhere we can control access. I understand wanting privacy, but does privacy require 18 months of planning?" 18 months isn't that long for what we're trying to coordinate, Taylor said, her voice getting defensive. "We're talking about flying 200 guests to France, arranging accommodations, coordinating with international vendors, handling visa requirements, managing security logistics." "Taylor, listen to yourself. You're talking about our wedding like it's a NATO summit. Because that's the level of planning required for a celebrity wedding that won't be completely ruined by media interference." Travis was quiet for a moment, processing Taylor's intensity. "Is that really what you're worried about? Media ruining our wedding?" "Yes," Taylor said, her voice getting emotional. "I'm worried about photographers hiding in bushes during our ceremony. I'm worried about tabloids bribing caterers for photos. I'm worried about our private moment becoming a public spectacle. And you think planning everything 18 months in advance prevents that?" "I think planning everything 18 months in advance gives us the best chance of controlling what can be controlled." Travis reached across the table, moving aside some of the venue photos. "Taylor, what if we planned something for next summer instead? 6 months from now." "Next summer?" Taylor looked at him like he'd suggested they get married tomorrow. "Travis, that's impossible. You can't plan a destination wedding in 6 months. "Why not?" "Because good venues won't be available. Quality vendors will be booked. We won't have time to handle all the logistics properly. What if we didn't need a destination wedding? What if we did something here in the States?" "I just explained why that won't work. The media attention would be overwhelming." "What if we managed the media attention instead of running away from it?" Taylor felt her frustration building. "You say that like it's easy. You don't understand what it's like to have every detail of your personal life scrutinized and criticized. And you don't understand what it's like to feel like we're planning for the media instead of for us. We're planning for us. We're planning for privacy and intimacy and a beautiful celebration. Are we? Because right now it feels like we're planning for 2 years from now instead of planning to be married." Taylor closed her laptop with more force than necessary. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I want to marry you, Taylor. I don't want to spend the next 18 months planning to marry you. Those are the same thing." "No, they're not. One is about becoming husband and wife, and the other is about creating the perfect event. And what's wrong with wanting our wedding to be perfect?" Travis was quiet for a long moment, studying Taylor's face. "Nothing's wrong with wanting it to be perfect, but something's wrong when perfectionism becomes more important than the actual marriage. That's not what I'm doing, isn't it, Taylor? You just spent 6 hours researching French castles without asking me if I even want to get married in France. I was doing research so we could make informed decisions together, but you weren't researching what I might want. You were researching what you think would solve your problems with media attention." Taylor felt defensive immediately. "I'm trying to solve our problems with media attention. But what if I don't think those problems require the solutions you're researching? What does that mean?" "It means maybe I'd rather deal with some paparazzi and get married next summer than avoid paparazzi and get married in 2 years. You don't understand what dealing with paparazzi actually means. And you don't understand what waiting 2 years to start our marriage actually means." They stared at each other across the table, both realizing they'd stumbled into a fundamental disagreement about priorities. "So, what are you saying?" Taylor asked quietly. "That my concerns about privacy don't matter." "I'm saying your concerns about privacy shouldn't be the only factor that determines when and how we get married. And I'm saying that your desire to rush into marriage shouldn't override practical considerations about planning and logistics." "Rush into marriage," Travis repeated, his hurt visible. "Taylor, we've been engaged for 3 months. Taylor, you just spent 6 hours researching French castles without asking me if I even want to get married in France. I was doing research so we could make informed decisions together, but you weren't researching what I might want. We've been together for over a year. How is wanting to get married next year rushing? Because good weddings take time to plan properly. Good weddings or perfect weddings. What's the difference? Good weddings are about celebrating our love with people who matter to us. Perfect weddings are about controlling every variable so nothing can go wrong." Taylor stood up abruptly, pacing away from the table. "And what's wrong with not wanting things to go wrong on our wedding day?" "Nothing. But what's wrong with accepting that some things might go wrong in marrying me anyway?" "I'm not talking about small things going wrong. I'm talking about our wedding being ruined by media circus. And I'm talking about our engagement being consumed by 2 years of wedding planning stress." "It's not stress. It's preparation." "Taylor, look around this kitchen. You've been working on wedding planning for 8 hours. Yesterday you spent 6 hours on vendor research. The day before that, you spent 4 hours on guest list logistics. When did this become a full-time job?" Taylor looked at the materials covering Travis's entire kitchen table and realized he had a point. "I've been thorough because I want us to make good decisions. But whose definition of good decisions are we using?" "I don't understand what you mean." "I mean, you've been researching European venues without asking if I want a European wedding. You've been planning for 2027 without asking if I want to wait that long. You've been solving problems I didn't know we had. I was trying to anticipate issues so we could address them proactively. But what if the issues you're trying to solve aren't the issues that matter to me?" Taylor felt tears starting to form. "Then what issues matter to you?" "I don't want to spend the next 18 months planning our wedding. I don't want our engagement to become about vendor management and logistics coordination. I don't want to feel like we're planning an event instead of starting a marriage. And I don't want our wedding to be ruined by poor planning or media interference." "So, where does that leave us?" They stood in Travis's kitchen, both recognizing they'd reached an impasse between Taylor's need for control and Travis's desire for simplicity. "I think," Taylor said carefully, "we want different things from our wedding planning process." "I think," Travis agreed, "we have different priorities about timeline and approach. So, what do we do?" Travis sat back down at the table looking at all of Taylor's research materials. "I think we need to figure out what we both actually want before we make any more plans." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe we need to start with what matters to each of us instead of starting with what you think will prevent problems." Taylor returned to her seat, closing the binders full of venue research. "Okay, what matters to you?" "I want to marry you soon rather than later. You've been solving problems I didn't know we had. I was trying to anticipate issues so we could address them proactively. But what if the issues you're trying to solve aren't the issues that matter to me?" Taylor felt tears starting to form. "Then what issues matter to you?" "I don't want to spend the next 18 months planning our wedding. I don't want our engagement to become about vendor management and logistics coordination. I want our families there. I want it to feel like a celebration, not a production. I want to start our marriage without feeling like we spent 2 years stressed about planning one day. And what matters to me," Taylor said slowly, "is that our wedding isn't ruined by media interference. That it's beautiful and meaningful. That we don't look back and regret not taking time to plan properly. Those things don't seem incompatible. They do when you consider timelines and logistics. What if we considered different approaches to logistics? Like what? Like what if we found ways to have privacy and beauty and meaning without needing 18 months in a European castle?" Taylor was quiet for a moment. "I don't know how to do that. Maybe we figure it out together instead of you figuring it out for us." "What does that look like?" "It looks like both of us researching options, both of us prioritizing what matters, both of us compromising on things that matter less." "I don't know how to not control the planning process," Taylor admitted. "I'm scared that if I don't manage every detail, something important will fall through the cracks. And I don't know how to be patient about starting our marriage when I'm ready to be married now. I'm scared that the longer we spend planning, the more complicated and stressful everything becomes." They looked at each other across the table, both recognizing they'd named their core fears. "So, how do we work with those fears instead of against each other?" Taylor asked. "Maybe we set a timeline that feels urgent enough to keep planning manageable, but long enough to handle logistics properly." "What does that look like?" "What if we aimed for next summer? Not next month, but not 2 years from now either." Taylor considered this. Summer 2026 was only 8 months away. Much shorter than her preferred timeline, but significantly longer than Travis seemed to want. 8 months to plan a wedding with the privacy and security requirements we need. 8 months to plan a wedding that prioritizes what actually matters to us. "I'm scared 8 months isn't enough time. And I'm scared 18 months is too much time." So maybe we compromise somewhere in between. What would compromise look like? Taylor thought carefully. What if we aimed for late summer 2026? That gives us 10 months, which feels more manageable for logistics, but still keeps us moving forward. And what if we agreed on priorities together before we start planning details? That sounds smart. What would our priorities be? Travis considered this privacy but not necessarily international travel for all our guests. Beautiful but not necessarily perfect. Meaningful but not necessarily complicated. I can work with those priorities, Taylor said. And what about you? Can you work with 10 months of planning if I include you in the process instead of presenting you with conclusions? I can work with 10 months if it feels like we're building something together instead of you managing a project. I want to build something together, good, because I want to help plan our wedding, not just approve your wedding plans. They spent the next hour clearing Taylor's research materials off the kitchen table and starting over with a single notebook and 2 pens. Okay, Taylor said, opening the notebook. If we could have any wedding we wanted, what would it look like? I would want our families there. I would want good food and music. I would want to dance with you. I would want it to feel like us. Taylor wrote down his answers. I would want it to be beautiful and private. I would want meaningful vows. I would want photos we'll love, and I would want to feel present instead of worried about logistics. Those things seem compatible. They do. And they don't necessarily require a European cassette or 18 months of planning or 8 months of stress because we're rushing. So, what do we actually need to make those things happen? Travis thought about it. A venue that can provide privacy but still feels special. Good vendors we trust. Photography that captures the day authentically. And security that keeps media out without making our guests feel like they're entering a fortress. It doesn't sound impossible to achieve in 10 months. It doesn't. It just sounds like it requires different research and different priorities than what I was doing. Want to start over? I want to start over together. 2 hours later, they had a completely new approach. Instead of Taylor researching everything and presenting options, they would divide tasks based on interests and strengths. Travis would handle venue visits and security logistics. Taylor would manage vendor selection and design elements. They would handle timeline and guest decisions together. This feels completely different, Taylor said, looking at their collaborative planning framework. How so? It feels like we're creating something together instead of me trying to solve problems on my own. And it feels like I'm contributing meaningfully instead of just agreeing to your recommendations. Travis: yeah, I'm sorry I took over the planning without including you. Your ideas about what makes a celebration meaningful are just as important as my concerns about logistics. And I'm sorry I minimized your concerns about media attention and privacy. Those are real issues that require real planning. I like that we can disagree about approach and still want the same outcome. What outcome is that? A wedding that feels like us, planned by us for us. I like that outcome. 3 weeks later, December 6th, Taylor and Travis had visited 4 potential venues together and found one that met both of their priorities. A private estate in Rhode Island that could accommodate their guest list, provide security, and still feel intimate and personal. This feels right, Taylor said as they walked through the gardens. It feels like a place where we could actually relax and celebrate, Travis agreed. And it feels like a place that can be beautiful without requiring a year and a half of planning. Should we schedule it on August 15th? August 15th, 2026. August 15th, 2026. I adore that date. I'm glad we decided on it jointly. A week later, Andrea inquired about wedding preparations when Taylor and her mother were eating lunch. How is the planning for the wedding going? Together, they would manage the schedule and visitor choices, looking over their collaborative planning framework. Taylor remarked, "This feels completely different." In what way? Instead of me attempting to fix issues on my own, it feels like we're working together to create something. And rather than merely accepting your suggestions, Travis, I feel like I'm making a significant contribution. Yes, I apologize for taking over the planning without consulting you. Your thoughts on what constitutes a meaningful celebration are equally as significant as my logistical worries. I apologize for downplaying your worries regarding privacy and media attention. You were studying European castles when we last spoke. So much better, Taylor remarked. After a heated argument about timeliness and control, Travis and I drastically altered our strategy. What was altered? I came to the realization that, rather of planning for what we truly wanted, I was preparing our wedding for media issues. Additionally, Travis made it clear to me that some of my perfectionism was really control disguised as preparation. That seems like a significant development. Yes, it was. Instead of designing something for 2027 that feels like a safeguard against worst-case scenarios, we are now planning something for August that feels like us. What are your thoughts on the condensed timeline? Actually, less nervous. It turns out that trying to plan something flawless alone is more difficult than arranging something important with others. When a reporter questioned Travis about wedding preparations 2 weeks later, he had an obvious answer. It's important to keep in mind that you're organizing a celebration of your relationship, rather than a safeguard against potential problems, he stated. When you focus on what matters to you as a couple instead of what might matter to other people, the decisions become much clearer. Taylor also shared her thoughts when asked how to strike a balance between perfectionism and partnership. The most perfect wedding is one where both people feel like they contributed to building something that represents their love. She added, I learned that perfect isn't about controlling every variable. It's about creating something authentic to who you are together. Because sometimes the most crucial lesson is to distinguish between planning for what you want and planning against what you fear. You were studying European castles when we last spoke. So much better, Taylor remarked. After a heated argument about timeliness and control, Travis and I drastically altered our strategy. What was altered? I came to the realization that, rather than planning for what we truly wanted, I was preparing our wedding for media issues. Additionally, Travis made it clear to me that some of my perfectionism was really control disguised as preparation. That seems like a significant development. Yes, it was. Instead of designing something for 2027 that feels like a safeguard against worst-case scenarios, we are now planning something for August that feels like us. What are your thoughts on the condensed timeline? Actually, I'm less nervous. Inviting your partner to contribute to the future you're creating together, even if it means giving up some power in the process, is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. How do you feel about this tale of conflict in wedding preparation? Identifying control tendencies and developing cooperative skills as a couple. Have you ever had to choose between several strategies when organizing significant life events? Sometimes the most beautiful results come from learning to construct something together, rather than striving to make something flawless on your own. Please share your opinions in the comments section below. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about love, growth, and the lovely task of learning to build a life together. If this story served as a reminder that the best partnerships are built on shared decision-making and mutual respect for each other's contributions, because sometimes choosing to make something that feels like both of you rather than something flawless that feels like just one of you is the most romantic thing you can do.